What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're going to be talking about some 10th edition reveal articles that Games Workshop has posted over the last couple days. These articles have a little bit of a similar theme, so I wanted to talk about them together alongside my thoughts about what's being previewed in 10th edition. Now, the first one was from yesterday, the 13th. This one talks about vehicles in the new edition and some of their defensive stat lines. And basically, what we're seeing is a theme of dramatically increased survivability. Now, if you looked at the Terminator data sheet that was spoiled earlier, we saw that Terminators and other similar units were also getting a survivability increase. Terminators going to toughness 5 and getting a 4+ invulnerable save, and we're seeing something similar happen to vehicles now. We see enormous statistical increases on the defensive end for vehicles, sort of allegedly to counteract some of the offensive creep that the game has been experiencing. So we see Rhinos, which are previously a toughness 7 kind of light vehicle, and toughness 7 was really used to represent vehicles that had this sort of medium vehicle armor, I suppose. And those are being increased all the way up to toughness 9. Now, at the same time, we can also see some additional abilities being represented. The first one being self-repair. So in addition to having a higher toughness value, the Rhinos also automatically regenerate lost wounds. This is a callback to a very old mechanic that Rhinos used to have. They used to have a chance to repair themselves if they were damaged, and now it just happens automatically. So it's more difficult to kill, and if you don't kill it, it's going to be regenerating wounds. Now, on the flip side, weapons are also becoming slightly more lethal. We can see the Hunter-Killer here moving up to 2+ ballistic skill at strength 14, but still only d6 damage. So the amount of wounds versus damage that units will have is going to be basically the same as it was. But what we are seeing is more granularity in the toughness versus strength characteristics of weapons. Now, I think this is going to do a couple things, and I do think it's a little problematic in some ways, especially that profile matchups is going to be much more impactful in 10th edition than it has been in the past. Now, I've talked about profile matchups in the past, I think both on the channel and on advanced tactics videos. Essentially, what you want to be doing is matching your offensive profiles as closely as you can to your opponent's defensive profiles. So you wound them on 2s or 3s and don't have armor piercing or damage characteristics that exceed the number of wounds that the target has, so that the number of wounds that your target has is easily divisible by the damage characteristic of your attack. And that means that you're attacking as efficiently as you can into the target profile. So for example, if you have something that's, toughness 6 and has 4 wounds, you want to be attacking it with a strength 7 2 damage weapon, or like strength 12 4 damage, one of those two. And this system where we see these wider differences between strength and toughness values, I think is going to create these profile matchups. It's sort of incredibly important in the metagame of 10th edition. Now, this gets even more granular when we start talking about some of the other vehicle profiles that we've seen. So we have toughness 9 on the Rhino chassis, and we can also see that we're sharing toughness 9 with Storm Speeders. So Storm Speeders, compared to Rhinos, have actually gotten significantly more defensive. Since they used to be toughness 6 in 9th edition, moving up to toughness 9 means that they're basically like a T, 7.5, I guess. Or that Rhinos have comparatively been decreased in survivability. But when we start moving on to the heavier armored vehicles, the main battle tank style units, we see some wide variances in the toughness value of these units. Gladiator Valiants coming in at toughness 10, whereas Repulsor is coming in at toughness 12. This is where I say that these profile matchups are going to be really, really important. If you have a weapon that's strength 9, like a las cannon is currently, and like a Melta weapon will be in 10th edition, which we'll talk about momentarily, the profiles for some Melta weapons have been revealed. Attacking toughness 9 vehicles is pretty effective, so a Melta weapon is going to be pretty good against something like a Rhino or a Storm Speeder. But as soon as you get that +1 bump in toughness to the Gladiator or Repulsor chassis, and you go to toughness 10 or 12, suddenly you wound on 5s, and you're much less efficient at shooting with those vehicles. So the armored vehicles are going to need to take sort of these heavy anti-tank weapons to take down. And it sounds like tank-mounted weapons are going to be the best solution to dealing with other tanks. We already have a little bit of a reveal that railguns are going to be strength 20, meaning that they're going to be wounding these gladiators on 2s and repulsors on 3s. So at the lower levels of this weapon meta, the comparison between the weapon strength and the target toughness is going to be extremely, extremely important. You're going to be wanting to mount those, strength 9, strength 10 weapons against vehicles, these lighter vehicles, but you need to shell out for some heavier hitting weapons against these tougher vehicles. I'm not sure if I like the level of granularity that exists in there. Well, weapon efficiency is a little binary in Warhammer 40k. Either your weapon is good in a situation or it's not that good. And I think making it so that there are more situations where your weapons basically get blanked by idiosyncrasies in the opponent's defensive stat line makes it so that it's very difficult to create, kind of an all-rounder style army. You really have to be solving for the metagame, and whatever style of vehicles your opponents are taking, you have to take the correct weapons to kill them. Now, obviously, there's a lot that hasn't been revealed yet. Once we get full data sheets, we're going to see trends in these stat lines, and we're going to be able to start, to create kind of models of efficiency for different anti-tank profiles. But I think that it does make tanks extremely tanky, especially against these sort of low to mid-strength weapons. Now, speaking of weapons, we do have another article talking about weapons in 10th edition, and we get a little bit of a reveal on some of the weapon keywords that we've been seeing being added to these data sheets. So we have, I think, a really interesting example is the bolt rifle. Now, one thing that I wasn't sure whether it was going to happen, all 3 variants of the bolt rifle that intercessors carried have been rolled into a single one. And I almost wonder if there is a precedent to start to roll all of the Marine infantry together into kind of a single data sheet. And I don't know if that will happen in this edition, but it may be something that happens in the far future, where we see things like tactical Marines and intercessors actually sharing a data sheet, where a bolt weapon is a bolt weapon is a bolt weapon, and whether they're carrying a bolt rifle, a Starker bolt rifle, an auto bolt rifle, or a classic bolter, they're all going to have a similar or the same profile. In this case, the intercessors now can assemble their guns however they want, and the idiosyncrasies of each gun is not actually being represented. They just have an amalgamated profile that represents all 3 varieties. And it has a really interesting set of characteristics. It's 2 base attacks out to 24 inches, so it doesn't use the rapid fire mechanic that we saw that the Terminators have, but it comes in at that strength 4 AP1, the classic bolt rifle profile. However, it also has the heavy characteristic. And heavy weapons work a lot differently than previously. Instead of penalizing their unit for moving and shooting, they actually give you a bonus if you remain stationary and shoot. So it's a much more flexible rule, but it does give you a big benefit if you play them like classic heavy weapons. They end up hitting on 2s at that point if you stand still with the unit. So instead of getting the benefit of additional attacks out to maximum range if you stand still, you're getting +1 to hit, which means that firing on the move as an assault weapon is much more reasonable. They are also assault weapons, which allows you to advance and shoot. It doesn't appear that you suffer a penalty anymore to assault weapons when you advance and shoot, so it looks like the self-imposed hit penalties are kind of going the way of the dodo. Weapons will no longer give you -1 to hit when you attack with them, which is great, I think. It just increases flexibility, and that means that this weapon is extremely flexible. You can stand still and shoot at +1 to hit. You can move and shoot with no penalty, or you can assault and shoot, which is the most likely the restriction that you cannot then charge. Moving on, we do have some additional weapon characteristics that we can see. The assault cannon has the devastating wounds characteristic, which we saw when we took a look at the Terminator datasheet. This one converts their damage characteristic to mortal wounds on a wound roll of 6. So I think that this is being basically used as a replacement to the rending effect, where a wound roll of 6 would add to the armor penetration characteristic of the weapon. So assault cannons at their base level are going to be AP 0, but if they're fishing for those 6s to wound, they're going to be instead entirely bypassing the armor save. The strength value of assault cannons from the previous versions has not changed. They are still strength 6, and if we remember, we saw a lot of these heavily armored vehicles are moving up to toughness 12, meaning that assault cannons, a weapon that is usually wounding basically everything in the game on 5s, is now going to be wounding a lot of these heavy vehicles on 6s. And I think that we're going to see this trend that light small arms fire is going to be much less effective. Not only did we see Terminators move up to toughness 5, which means most strength 4 weapons aren't even close to doing damage to them, but we're also seeing a lot of these kind of mid-strength special weapons not push up their strength characteristic high enough to do damage to vehicles. I do wonder if the pendulum will end up having swung a little bit far in the avenue of being defensive. I do think there are going to be some profiles in this article that are spoiled that are going to be very dangerous to heavily armored vehicles. I think that it may be that, if you're not in melee, basically, infantry shooting at vehicles will almost never be able to take them down, which maybe is desired. Fortunate for armies that are melee-centric. So speaking of which, we see the Melta rifle profile here. This is the Eradicator's weapon, gotten some significant debuffs. It has gone up to strength 9, but again, all the vehicles in the game are going up in the world. This thing's going to wound Terminators on 3s, it's going to wound Rhinos on 4s, and it's going to wound other more heavily armored battle tanks on 5s, which is way worse than we've ever seen a Melta weapon convert in the history of the game. It retains its high AP value, and it comes with the Melta 2 ability, which gives it that many additional damage if you attack within half range. So it's just the current Melta rule, but they give themselves the option to do additional damage. We'll probably see sort of heavy Melta rifles at like Melta 4, for example, I would imagine. It does have a slightly decreased range, however, going down to 18 inches of range, which means that Eradicators will have a tough time actually accessing that Melta rule, I think. Now, we also see some additional special weapon characteristics when we look at things like Shuriken Cannons. Now, Shuriken Cannons very similar to the Assault Cannon coming in at that strength 6 value, so they're probably not going to hold a candle to heavily armored vehicles, but they come with the Sustained Hits ability, which gives them a number of additional hits on hit rolls of 6. So this is just exploding hits or Tesla hits that we've seen on weapons in the past. These weapons are going to get exploding 6s. The Assault Cannon that we saw previously is going to be converting itself to mortal wounds on high wound rolls. So these weapons do have ways to get around this heavy armor, but again, those actual wound rolls themselves are going to be tough. So I don't think you would expect more than maybe 1 or 2 converted attacks out of any of these infantry special weapons. Now, the difference is a little bit when we take a look at the Aggressor Squad. Now, these have the new Twin-Linked characteristic, and according to this article, Twin-Linked gives you full wound rerolls when you attack with a Twin-Linked weapon. And I think this is where we start to see kind of the damage calculation revert a little bit. An Aggressor now attacks half as many times, so 3 attacks with the Autumn Boltstorm Gauntlets rather than 6. It comes in at Strength 4 AP 0, but, again, gives them those full wound rerolls regardless of what they're attacking. Now, I think even more interestingly is that their Power Fists are also going to be Twin-Linked. So they're coming in with 3 attacks at Strength 8, meaning they are wounding most vehicles on 5s, but again have full wound rerolls and a high AP value. It seems to me, especially given this example, that melee is going to be where a lot of armor cracking in the game ends up occurring. And that means that I think, for the most part, at least for shooting armies, vehicles are going to kind of reign supreme. It doesn't seem to me, unless we have some ridiculous support abilities. We have seen a couple support abilities from characters being spoiled, which are pretty effective, but I don't know if they're entirely transformative to these units. And it feels like the vehicles in the game are going to be basically unkillable by infantry units at range. Vehicles may be able to kill each other, especially because we did get at that aforementioned spoiler that railguns are coming in at strength 20. So these big, huge anti-armor weapons, the anti-tank weapons that are, turret mounted, are probably going to be just as good at killing other tanks as they are right now. But once you win that tank battle, I'm not sure infantry are really going to be able to hold a candle to you. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. Makes me a little worried that things will be too defensive, and we may be sort of back to the days where infantry fight infantry and vehicles fight vehicles, and the two subtypes of units don't really intersect very much, which I think makes the game a lot less interesting. But I mean, again, we're still early in the spoiler season. We'll have to see. But it is really interesting, and I think it shows us that 10th edition is going to be dramatically different from 9th, whereas 9th was much more of a continuation of the 8th edition mechanics and metagame. 9th edition is going to be a whole different ballgame, and we're going to have to totally reevaluate how we rate a unit's survivability. I hope things aren't too defensive. I think if the game gets too defensive, things get a little boring and stale. But again, the hyper lethality of 40k is often touted as one of the biggest downsides of the game, so it does feel like this is a concerted effort to try to curb that. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you think about these. Looking forward to hear what you think. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for supporting as well, everyone who supports, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All those people are great. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.